Hello, and welcome to the second episode of the podcast on a modern tale of Animal Farm. We continue from the time after the purchase of the freehold of Cavendish Court. A new dawn was upon Cavendish Court, and jubilation was in the air as the leaseholders looked forward to preparing for a life as freeholders with no more fear of a declining lease and the financial burden that would entail. The prospect of being exploited by unscrupulous freeholders was also in the past. Those who own a share of the freehold now have 999 years on their lease. The main protagonist of this episode, whose name was Brett, was already planning a place for himself as the new freeholder of Cavendish Court. A meeting took place soon afterwards, during which Brett declared himself, Yen, Jenny, and Nicole to be the new directors of Cavendish Freehold Company, as well as directors of the Right to Manage Company. Rob, who was the director of the Freehold Company, had largely been absent throughout the past year and was not present to have his say. He was pushed out of the company. Little did I realize at the time what Brett's motives were, but it soon became apparent what he was up to. As I got busy with trying to learn the responsibilities of managing a freehold company, I was doing a lot of researching and reading. I asked George to step in as company secretary because he had experience with running a limited company. One of the first tasks we had to do was to collect the ground rent. A ground rent demand had to be drafted, and it was up to me to do the job. It was during this time that Brett's true nature revealed itself. Let's listen on to find out what happened. Brett then started doing things. He started trying to manage, and he started coming up with ideas that he thought was great, or ideas that showed his complete ignorance. He wanted to change the name of the companies. He wanted to try to get to have the two companies under one company name, which was called Cavendish Court Association, which I totally disagree with, because I said you can't use a company. You can't try and merge the companies because these companies are different. They have different functions. They're separate companies. And it took me a really long time, weeks, months probably, to explain to him how he can do that. He can't go through with that idea. And then because the others are their ignorance as well, they didn't understand, and they seemed to think that I was the one who's being difficult and not agreeing with them. And then he tried to. One of the worst one he did was he tried to use money from one company to pay another. Because the freehold company was collecting only £200 ground rent every year, which is 2 flats. It was about 400, I think they were getting in total. And he didn't want to manage the company. He wanted to get another company to manage the freehold company. I said, no, why would you do that? There's hardly anything to do. All you have to do is collect ground rent every year. But it's like I said, his was all about me being a director. And so he wanted Prime Property Management to manage the freehold company as well as the RTM company. And he came up with this idiotic with schemes like, well, we'll use the money from the Right to Manage to pay for the fees for the freehold company, which I said no, because you cannot do that. That is fraud. It's basic financial fraud. Anybody with any intelligence would understand that. So I said no. And that led into arguments between myself and the three of them, a complete. And so there was a lot of there was a lot of infighting in the building between me and them, because they couldn't understand it. And then I said, look, this is not working. You can't have Brett as the director of both companies because it's too risky. I said you have to separate the directorship and have Brett manage only one company. Because if he does anything to our company, he won't be able to ruin the other company. If it's the way he is going right now, he's going to ruin both company and we'll be in a lot of trouble. And so there was a meeting in which I called a meeting with the leaseholder and said, look, you need to separate the directorship. Well, what happened was that Brett, Nicole, Jenny, and George, they went to the meeting. They did something which is which is typical of how these people behave. They had their secret meeting together, and they colluded, and they said, okay, we're going to say, yeah, there's a problem here, and then oh. Do you want to take? And then, so in the meeting, they just didn't have a clue what to do, and it was just disastrous as usual. And then after that, I didn't want to work with this person because I didn't trust him. He was blatantly dishonest. So I said, I'm not going to be director in the company. I'm not going to work with these people.
So there's learning here about forming director or a company yourself, that you should have a veto power, you should have some duration where it has to be cycled, somebody else comes in, because now you've got somebody in that role and you're not able to do anything about it, and he doesn't understand the role. His motivation for that role is completely different from what you expected it to be. So so in general terms, one should be aware of how to manage these roles or company as well. For future learning, it's a future learning.
There's lack of accountability, and that comes from ignorance and lack of education. You can't keep people accountable.
The main thing is he is what he is. Okay, so if you were more aware, or if you had better understanding of how the company should run, learning from here would be, okay, next time if I have the opportunity, or anytime we get an opportunity, have a 1-year period for every director, and a director cannot be a director again the next year until nobody else wants to be the director.
That is the problem, because nobody else wants to be director, which is why we had
then you can't complain.
Well, we had this idiot. I'm going to leave it. We had this person to be. And then the others, well, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't want to do it. But it's when you are, I'm going to use this. Idiots don't really understand what they're doing, and they don't have a grasp of the full consequences of what would happen if things go wrong.
No, my point would be, what about yourself then? Would you not want to be a director if he's doing such a bad job, and if he doesn't understand the role of being director, and you do? Would you not want to be director yourself?
I was, but I didn't want to work with somebody who was so dishonest, because anything goes wrong, they'll blame you. He'll blame me.
Okay,
so I didn't want to be in a position where, when things go wrong, where disaster happens, I'm in there. Yes. I don't want to be part of that. And this is what I've done all the time. Is if you see somebody who don't match up to your standards that you have, then you have to get away. If they show dishonest behavior, if they show it's criminal behavior.
Again, there is a learning there. Maybe all the communication, all the agreements, and all that can be recorded somehow, whether it's email or in writing.
Yeah, there's some emails, but still, there's a lot of arguments going on. Me trying to control him, and he didn't want. He saw himself as superior, as the ruler, and everybody else was obedient to him. Has to be obedient to him. Which the other three, George, Nicole, and Jenny, they seem to be quite obedient to him. And as long as he had that, and it's me who was disagreeing, then he has. As long as he had that kind of support, it seems like there is more support for him. Like
Yes, but if you had a rule that the director had to finish after a certain period, like 1 year or 2 years.
They never have that in
No, but
there.
that's a learning that if next
It's
opportunity you
not
could
even
probably.
about the learning. It's about the fact that it's like you said. If there's nobody else wanting to be director, then you're stuck with what you're stuck with,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And it comes down to the level of ignorance in this, that these people can't even discern when they are in
They
trouble.
are just going to be what they are. Their priorities are not there for this. Their understanding is not there. They don't have time for this. They've got other. So they are going to be that. So you have to accept it and see if you can find a solution in those constraints.
I have found the solution. It's had he been, and he wasn't even gracious enough. He knew that he didn't know what he was doing, but he didn't care. All he wanted to do was be a director, and he just wanted land. If he had any common sense or any intelligence, he would have basically resigned after a year, because he knew that he didn't have a clue. And the fact that him and the other directors who were with him, working with him, like Kaleem and Rob and the others, they didn't even know what they were doing either. So it's, stupidity on top of stupidity on top of stupidity. And they just they basically copy from each other. If somebody does something wrong and you don't know any better, you just carry on with what's been done. Like,
Okay, as you said that you don't want to be part of that organization or
toxic.
the toxic relationship, but the risk of that they will be doing some wrongdoing. So, but you don't want to get blamed for that.
Exactly.
Their realm. However, you still have the right as a leaseholder to prevent any miss or something wrong.
And then I was fighting a lone battle in this building. Like I said, it was just ignorance on top of ignorance on top of ignorance, and nobody even understands. You look at the building, you think about just looking at the state of the building. That building was the ugliest, dirtiest, vulgar on that whole street. It had been neglected since right to manage, and nobody. I mean, even when there was sewage spillage, nobody said anything. Nobody complained except for me. Nobody really complained to the managing agent. Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? Nobody complained.
And biggest loss was, since your right to manage was your freehold went up from 60,000 to 115K because you couldn't get your things together. So there are big issues in right to manage. You have to work as a team, and if you can't work as a team, then maybe right to manage is actually a more disaster than.
Yeah,
you kind of say that?
I think this situation reminds me of Animal Farm. The book in Animal Farm by George Orwell, very famous book talking about totalitarian. It was a political allegory about what happens in the totalitarian state, and how, if you read the commentary, the one predominant theme that comes across is the ignorance of the animals.
And the power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So Brett was like, he was Napoleon. He was all pure greed and ego and arrogance, and all he wanted was to be to own that building. And he would have the others who were like his guard dogs, who would just bark every time you disagree with him, and he would try. And as long as and then he had the complacency of everybody else in the building. Their attitudes are, I don't know what's going on. I'm not going to get involved. I'm not, I'm going to stay out of this. This is a fight between me and Brett. This is about personality. No, it wasn't. It was about the fact that he was completely out of order. And I knew when I said, split the directorship. You can be a director of one company, and then I'll be the director of another. And he refused. That is absolute greed. Like, why do you need to be a director of both companies when you can't even manage one company? When you don't even know what to do with one company?
Yeah, and I think it's more of personality issue, the personality problem, that he didn't want to engage with you or kind of thing.
Well, because I was the one who was I was the one who probably for the first time who actually
saw him for what he was and who actually disagreed with him.
And so he's protecting himself by not allowing you to. Yes. Yeah. For him,
I
his
was threats to his
exactly,
power, essentially.
exactly.
And he knew that, because I was the only person who has ever talked back to him and told him, no, you do not do this. Okay, you do not this. This is my money. You don't mess around with it. So basically, I was the only person who actually stood up to him, while everybody else, I don't know. You know. So that was quite shocking. You know, that was quite a shock to them, to him, and he fought against that.
Yes, and he's protecting his personality over the fact that things have to be done correctly, the role of directorship. So he wants to protect his personality or the issues with his personality more than that.
Yeah, it was so, for me, I mean, it was exactly as George Orwell has written it in An Animal Farm. You know, the pigs took over, the pigs made themselves, and the pigs were ruled by greed and power, and they kept everything for themselves, and they would try and punish everybody who tried to stood up against them. And I just found it so vulgar. The whole building was so vulgar, and I knew really already that of the kind of person he is, that it wouldn't go well. And when I came back and looked at the building and saw it was actually even worse than what I had anticipated, and it was just a complete mess of a building. It wasn't it was been neglected for so many years, and its smell. There were sewage, there were feces, there were rats around running around in rats, mice. So they had vermin problems. They don't know how to fix it, and nobody knows how to do it. They just thought, oh, the directors are doing that, I'll just leave it to the directors. They don't even understand that it's not.
Yeah, and that kind of behavior probably comes from the pre-right to manage time when things were getting done, and they're just continuing with that same kind of behavior. That things will get done, and having the trust on the company doing it.
Yeah. So I did have. They're very good at complaining about bitching about each other and thing, but they're not very good at being
seeing the problem.
So I did know. I did know of the first managing agent, David Atkin, the property management manager there, and I got to know him over the years. And one of the things he said that stood with me was, he said the problem with Cavendish Court is the leaseholders, and he was right. The problem with Cavendish Court is the leaseholder, is the people. Like, there's, when you behave like trash comes to you, and these people were just the most.
Yeah, but I'm just kind of.
They have, in the thing is, it happens that they attract not only undesirable characters. There was Coney, who were legalized criminal cowboys. And then they had the company that came to do the building, the windows in the building. They were cowboys. They weren't professional windows installer. They tried to change the doors.
Your photographs are witness to that.
They almost wrecked the building. But they didn't have any clue. I mean, they didn't have any. They keep attracting these kind of people to do, and now they're attracting prime property management. Another cowboy property managing agent, and they don't even have the intelligence that you need to sack the managing agent because they can't do the job.
So this has started because of the right to manage.
Yeah, all these problems started with right to manage and people's.
So instead of writing to that management company, why don't you ask this guy, Brett, to basically look into this matter? And that management company is not.
He doesn't have a clue what to do. He doesn't. All the years that he was a director, he didn't even know. He had never inspected the company documents once.
But in that case, that this management company can get away from this because they know that the director doesn't know his job, and this is what's happening. So they are taking advantage of that.
No, so legally, director doesn't have any obligations.
They do.
Then they should be sacked from it if he's not able to
But who's
fulfill
going to,
those.
who can do the job when they're sacked? Or like I had to scream. We did have, so after Brett, Nicole, George, I left them to be directors. Jenny also resigned because Jenny, she was a solicitor. She had a slight better understanding, of more intelligent than the rest. And then she's, and I guess, and she resigned from that. So the building, I think from about to 2020, it was George, Nicole, and Brett who were the directors, and they did nothing. Nicole, she even blocked any meetings, and Prime Management basically just agreed with her and did it. And I had been chasing them for about 4 years to do something about the building, to manage the building, and they did absolutely nothing because the directors told them not to do, not just to, probably to just ignore me. And that's what that's what the managing agent was doing. They were just following the orders of the director, and all they were doing was just collecting management fee, which I refused to pay because I'm not paying for this kind of treatment. I pay you, you work for me, so and you're not maintaining. I mean, there were it was so bad in the building that if it had not stopped and it had allowed to continue, then I'm quite sure there would have been another pandemic from there. Probably like the bubonic plague or something that come from there, because there was just so much
Okay. Now I can clearly see that you're doing things from your conviction, so that's the right thing to do. But now the situation is what it is. What are the solutions? What are the options for? What is the way forward?
Well, after me chasing the managing agent for about 3 years or something to hold a meeting, I got one of the guys, Oliver, to organize meeting with the residents, and they finally persuaded Prime to hold an AGM. Finally, that was in March this year. And then during the meeting, Nicole came on and she was saying, and when she was asked why there was no meeting, she said, my life has been so busy. I've had so many problems in my life. So she was just coming out with the most pathetic excuses for her pathetic behavior. And even though even in the meeting when she should have resigned because she couldn't do their job, she and George refused to resign. And after the meeting, I found out that they were still directors. Like during the meeting, they actually voted me in to be director. And as soon as it was over, I tried to sack the company, to remove the company. But then I found out that Prime was still keeping George and Nicole on as director, and they were ignoring me, like when I was trying to
because that's in their interest.
Yeah, of course it's in their interest. And so then I had to go and scream and shout at the leaseholders, and we need to remove these two as director. And then they had another meeting, and here's another problem, is that there are certain people in the building who have ego, who are usually more ego, more arrogant than the rest, and they would try to solve the problem. They think they know how to solve the problems, but they don't know how to solve the problem. So it was when there was another meeting, I told them to remove them as directors, which they did, but then they appointed another idiot, Mammoth, to be director, and another guy, James, who had moved in the building of I think it's a year or something ago, so he was quite new, but he was very eager. That's another ego. Like he said, "Oh, I want to be a director. I want to be a director. I want to be a director," but he didn't really know what he was doing either. So they got these two to be directors, and it's exactly the same story. So like Mammoth is now the director, who doesn't even know who doesn't have a clue what he's doing. And rather than sacking the managing agent, he's keeping them on, and the right thing to do is to sack and find another, because you simply cannot keep us.
Is there any way to go back, sell your right to manage to good management.
You can't
again,
sell the right to manage.
no.
That
No,
when you have
so
right to manage,
you can't go back now to anything. It's
no,
right to manage
because
on this.
yeah, well, because now the freehold is owned by the leaseholder themselves. If they cancel the right to manage, it goes back to the same people because the same people are the freehold company. So the same stupid, and I'm going to use these words. No, it's the same idiots are the right to manage. And Mamas was all keen, and he thought. I said to him, "Don't be a director because you don't know what you're doing." But he's again another egocentric. And I, at the time, I had planned to re-landscape the garden because there was a lot of problems in the garden. We had trees that were overgrown, and there were shallow roots, and they were things. So I told, and also around the garden, I said, you need to change the gardener because the current gardener appointed by Prime Property Management is not doing the job. He's clearly, I don't know what, all he does is come in with a pair of shears and trim and chop things off every now and then. So we needed to have a proper proper garden company who knows how to, and we need to re-landscape the garden, which was the plan. And I applied to the council to cut down the trees. But in the meantime, Mamas, who thinks he's the director and he knows what he's doing, he gave order to the new gardeners to remove every single plant in the bloody garden. And left it with nothing. And then afterwards, he brags to me, "Oh, the garden looks great. We don't have any more money. We're not going to spend any more money on the garden. We're just going to leave it." And I was like, "Are you serious?
Yeah.
You remove every single tree."
The decision is sole decision of the director. He doesn't consult with.
Yeah. And then there's two people, Shalane and James. These two who are. It's like I said, he's the new Napoleon. He's the Napoleon, and the others are just his dogs. I can't believe that they actually agreed. These two, they together, the three of them agreed on the same thing.
Isn't it? You should talk to all leaseholders.
No, they don't. They made that decision amongst themselves. He doesn't even know what a garden is, and so why is he making that kind of decision when he doesn't even know what a garden is? So he removed everything and said, "Oh, I'm not going to put anything back." And I was saying, well, and then I said, well, if you're not going to landscape the garden and put the plants back, then I can't cut down the trees. We can't cut down the trees. Okay. Not only that would just be environmental destruction, essentially. If you cut down the trees, where's the oxygen going to come from? You've just cut everything, removed everything. And one of the plants in there was English ivy that grew along the wall, the garage wall, and it was planted there because purposely by the previous owner, and its job was really to hide the wall basically,
and to make it look nicer,
and also to clean up the air in the garden because right next to the garden there was a car park, so there was carbon monoxide coming out there into the garden, but this ignorant idiot didn't even understand that, so he just went straight ahead. It was a simple act of vandalism and hooliganism, in my opinion.
Legalized.
Yeah, legalized vandalism and hooliganism. I said, why? He says he told me that they were advised by the gardener to remove the plants. So I said, well, just because you advised they told you to do something doesn't.
Gardener would not advise that.
Yeah, my thing is that they didn't understand what they would. So if you don't understand it, it doesn't matter who you hear it from. You're just not going to get it.
Yes.
So, and that plant was doing a lot of good in that building in that section, because we have problems with that wall where there's excessive amount of water that flows over because the gutter wasn't good. But the plant was actually protecting the wall from the pollution and also from the excessive water. So it was actually preventing mold from brewing there. And if you're going to be cutting down the trees, you need to have something in the garden to basically, keep to preserve the oxygen there. But again, they don't know. So now we've got this garden, and then I sent a very terse email to them, and I said, if this is your attitude, then I'm not going to proceed with the with cutting down the trees. I'm not going. I withdrew it. from there, and he was so shocked when I said it. He tried to organise it, because before he was very dismissive of me. He said, "Why is it that you're working against us here? And you should be. It's so tiring dealing with you because you're always working against us." And I said, "Well, okay, I'm not going to work with you." It's like, why would I even like agree to something that's so utterly ridiculous? So, I mean, if you leave the garden with no plants, you're going to have other problems with it. You're going to end up with soil erosion. You're going to create even more mold and do more lot. So there's just that total ignorance, and it's not just that garden. That's another disaster that they had. But there's another. But when I watched him doing things, I just found he was childish in the way he was doing it. So he sent out a wish list. He calls it a wish list. On there, he would have random things about what he wants to do, the building, things like, we're painting, decorating, and garage and stuff. And I said to him, you don't use a wish list. Okay, this is a restoration project. You need to have a project plan. And I created a project plan for them, and I sent it to them. They completely ignored it, like the three of them, like. But you know that they're taking orders from mammoths, from that idiot. And I don't know why, but he stuck with his wish list. And then there was times when he sent out an email to the leaseholders, to the residents of the building, and he said it was about the door in the building being left open and people were coming in, and there was some incidents of theft or something. In the email, he says, we'll start penalizing people if you don't shut the door properly. And I said, well, don't do that, because, you don't penalize people for living in this disgusting building. One thing, okay? If you invoke their anger, they'll take you to court, and you're the one who's going to end up being penalized when they properly complained, that they're living in sewage. They're living amongst sewage. So that was another idiotic decision. That they didn't even think once, and if they didn't even understand that how were they going to penalize people? It's because they can't prove it. It's like, you can't prove who left the door open, so it's a pointless kind of it. It was like an empty threat. It's pointless to do that, but they went ahead and they did that, and it just shows. I'm the managing agent who really should have known better. Because they should have known that you can't prove it. Why are you penalizing people? Like, why isn't he not penalizing the managing agent for their for neglect and mismanagement of his building? And yet he's penalizing the residents in here for just leaving. It's just
because the authority works on the leaseholders and not on the management agency.
Yeah, that is stupidity. That is somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, not having a clue. And here's another one who thinks, I don't need to know what I'm doing. If I do anything wrong, the managing agent will tell me. And he's totally dependent on the managing agent to tell him what to do.
So the solution is outside, not in your own head.
Yeah. And it's the sort of immaturity. This building is just a complete mess. And it's the people themselves who are a complete mess. And the total, I don't know. I've just never met people who are just this backwards.
That could be because I think it's not very specific to that building. You find people like this everywhere who are not bothered, whose priorities are something else, and they're consumed in something else, their own lives and things like that.
Yeah, I think.
It's about
ignorance among.
Yes, and therefore maybe right to manage is. Yeah, therefore, right to manage is probably not right for where people are not a team already. You have to be a team already to be able to do right to manage properly. Otherwise, leave it.
People who are knowledgeable and know what they're doing.
Yes, that is basically team, because the people who are not going to work should still be able to appreciate what somebody is capable or not capable, or they should still be aware of what. Who the right people are to be able to do to be voting for right to manage. And if they can't do that, then they're not part of the team. If everybody's going on their own frequency and own direction, then they're not What?
I think there are people who are very pushy, very, very arrogant, but don't combine that with intelligence. And it's the same in this building. There's people who push themselves forward and push everybody else backwards, and they're only interested in their own,
myopic view.
Yeah, and also interested in self-promotion, essentially.
Yes,
I mean,
and that's people everywhere. That's why if the set of people living as the leaseholders can't work as a team, don't have a common goal, do not have the understanding of what is required, then that is really a disaster, like you're explaining, isn't it?
Yeah. It is a disaster, and it's these kind of people we see a lot, we see a lot now. This kind of arrogance. Do you remember Stockton Rush? Stockton Rush was the man who made that submersible, who took those people down to the Titanic. That mentality is prevalent. It's among Brett and Mamas. They display the same, and James and the others, Nicole. They display the same mentality. So when Stockton Rush was told, "Do not take people down the road because your machine is not safe," you go in on YouTube and see his response and how he didn't care, basically.
So yes, he's steering the car into destruction almost, and people who are coming on board are voluntarily going into that.
Yeah, but not just that.
But in this case,
his attitude was not, but totally ignoring good advice, saying that he knows everything.
He's doing it for himself. That's fine, and then he's able to sell. Yeah,
they all do it for themselves.
In your case of leaseholders,
they are doing it for themselves.
That's right, but then you are forced to be in that car.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas the example you've just given, the people have chosen to be in that car.
Well, they weren't informed about. They weren't fully informed about it. And also that is their fault as well, really, because there were people that he tried to take on board. He tried to sell his trip to the Titanic for other people, and they didn't go. I mean, they said, "Oh, I looked at this machine and I didn't like it." There are those who will follow. There are people who will follow, and you need to understand, you need to think that just because somebody comes to you and call themselves professional and talk flattery
and all these big names and big calculations and all that.
Talk flattery, talk sweetness and kindness to you, and
act as if they know.
And also act as if they know what they're talking about. But it's up to you to actually read between the lines and not...
And use your own brain, basically.
Use your own brain.
For assessment.
I mean, like, why to think that you have to go and... you have to be discernible, that kind of... We all easily flattered. We all easily flattered. Just come and say, as long as people call you, "Oh, you're so lovely, we're going to help you with this," and that is how people. But those are the times.
That is when you have to use your mind.
It's not the person who comes and call you and tells you that they're professional. It's the person who comes and tell you, "Oh, I'm an idiot. I don't know what I want to do. That you should, because you should." But there's very few people who did that. But So that's the state that we have at the moment, is with these three who are Mamas, James and Charlene, who are self-appointed directors with support of some people in the building doing it. Mamas now wants to be the director of the freehold as well. Despite, like, when I said we need to buy the freehold, his response at the time was, "I don't need to buy the freehold. Why do I need to buy the freehold?" And now he wants to be the director of the freehold. I mean, talk about self-serving, even though he doesn't even have a clue. And Brett, who was the director of the freehold, when somebody came, he didn't have a clue what he was doing. When somebody asked to join the freehold, he left them waiting for 2 years because he was so
Now,
No.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
How did Brett give up his directorship and
He
Mama's take
resigned
it?
eventually.
Oh,
Yeah, he resigned a few months ago. I
what
guess he,
triggered that?
I don't know, maybe he said that he was going to traveling around
Oh,
in Hong Kong or something.
so
So that,
that could
yeah,
be a genuine reason, or maybe just a cover up for
yeah,
him realizing.
everything that he does is a cover up for
Right.
himself. It's
Okay.
nothing he does is ever genuine.
But you're also
Not
saying
so.
the new director is kind of acting the same way.
Yeah, they're
If not,
acting the same way.
so there is no
The same.
solution in that
No,
sense.
there's no solution. I mean, if anybody in this building was intelligent, if this has come from the fact that they think because they're young, they're younger than they think, and they're men, they're more aggressive and
Yeah.
pushy.
Yes.
They're more interested in self promotion, and when they see an opportunity like this, they will push for it.
And they're not aware of the implications of
No.
their actions.
You know,
They're
if
only
they were intelligent people at all, they would actually got Mr. Sims, who's 87 something in the building, and got him to be a director because he's a very smart man. He's got more intelligence than all of them put together. Seriously, he does.
Mm.
He's I've spent time with him, and he would come he would come out with things that I hadn't even thought of, right?
Wow.
And he's 87.
He's got experience.
Yeah, I mean, when I said to him, you know, Mum, they want to hold a meeting, and Mama sent out a wish list. The first thing he said was, no. What you need here is a plan. You know, I mean, that's an age, you know, if
Yeah.
somebody's age 7 years old, he understands
Yes,
that. And these people shouldn't be managed any company at all. It's just
Yes.
arrogance, greed, and egotism that's putting them there.
Yeah. So I'm sure these kind of things are happening elsewhere as well, and it'll be good if the
Yeah.
listeners can share their experiences, and
Yeah.
if they've come across
Yeah.
any solutions or any ways to come out of this.
Yeah.
I mean, it's clear that right to manage is not always easy. It probably works well if you know everybody in the leaseholders list,
Yeah.
and if everybody can work as a team. And that would require a lot of team management
Yeah.
skills, actually.
Yeah, in situations when you have people like this, there will
Yeah.
always be victims.
And
There will always be people who
yeah,
suffer.
yes,
And the person who suffer is Mr. Sims,
right, yes.
He has been ignored by these people for all these years,
Mm,
and he has been denied a garden so he
mm.
can, you know,
Sit
throughout
down.
the time where he can sit down and enjoy.
Yeah.
Because he enjoys plant life, he enjoys wildlife. He wants to sit in the garden and look at the plants and look at the butterflies and smell. And he tells me, you know, you look at the garden opposite in Stanner Court, it looks so nice. He would tell me that, and I feel so sorry for him, so bad for him, because it was not necessary at all.
Yeah.
And this company, the Prime Property Management, they ignored him. He asked them to remove some bushes that were giving him problems when he tried to read his gas meter, and they ignored him for 7 years. They ignored him.
Now they've cleaned up everything.
Yeah, but the only time they hear from him
Oh.
is when they want his service charge money. Then they send him and if he doesn't pay, they fine him. Like,
that's
you know?
illegal. Yeah, you could
Yeah.
take them to court, and
Yeah.
you've done. Yeah.
Yeah. And currently that is the situation. I don't really see that there's a solution unless people actually learn to behave, you know, themselves, and it's just a lack of good behavior, a lack of decency, morality, principles, standards,
And awareness, understanding.
understanding, self-awareness.
And-
It's all ego and arrogance and stupidity.
Yeah.
It's all of that. And it's exactly as in George Orwell predicted in his book. He wasn't talking about Russia. He's talking about every single
yes,
arrogance, which
yes.
every single dictator you've ever heard of. And
Yes,
that's what their motive was.
Yes.
And you'll notice if you do, you'll find that dictators are usually men who are not very well educated. Like, but that's, you know, the greed that comes with it. You know, they don't. It reminds me of like George Washington. You've heard of George Washington? He was the first American president. Do you know the story of George Washington? So after this is a condensed version, but after the Civil War, there's George Washington. He was victorious because he led the army, beat the English, and the American people were so very they loved George essentially because he was their leader at the time, and they actually wanted to appoint George as the king, as a king of America, a new king of America. But George Washington magnanimously turned that down because he saw he didn't like the royal absolute power that was in there, so he turned it down. But then he was appointed as a president, the first American president, and he served as president for 8 years. But then by when it comes to the third term of the presidency, he was getting to be about 60 and onwards, and George Washington decided then that he would not stand for the third term, that he would resign as a president, because he didn't want to die in the position as president, because he felt it would essentially, it means it would set the wrong precedent for future future leaders of this nation, because it was like, if you die as president, you're the same as a king, essentially, same as royalty. So he resigned, and that's how you have America. In America, you're only allowed two terms as presidency. Yeah. It's like, it takes a certain person to behave in a certain way,
with an integrity and awareness of the bigger picture, and not just himself.
Yeah, and George, I don't think he ever dreamed that he would still be remembered 200 years later and be on a dollar bill. He wasn't motivated by it. This man was very highly intelligent. He had very well read. I mean, he had a library of 1,000 books. So he was well aware of that. And these men, they were four. They were called the founding fathers of America. But you think of how the presidents behaving currently compared to that. Yeah. And even in this tiny building,
it's a small scale of
it's like totalitarianism happens because people are never going to be as never be. So it takes. Okay, thank you. They had the meeting last time. They were complaining about how I was insulting them. And I think it was Mamas of Summer. One of them says that, oh, even Prime hates yen. You're
the one who's trying to get rid of Prime because they're not doing their job, right?
Yeah. Are we supposed? Is that supposed to make?
It's a compliment. You should take it as a compliment.
Is it supposed to make me look bad? This company hates me. It's like, you're the idiots. You've been giving them free money for the past 7 years, and I'm trying to sack them. Of course, they're going to hate me. They don't love you. They love you, Mama's boy, because you keeps giving them money all the time. It's like, it's so ridiculous.
Height of things.
Yeah, I mean, could you not even see that what this company is about? Is it really that difficult to understand?
It's obvious, isn't it? Yes.
I mean, all they want is money.
They're not doing their work, and that's reflective of your directorship and all that on this side.
Yeah,
and
I'm the one who's holding them accountable, and they're not. They cancelled meetings for the past 4 years.
Gosh.
So they've been very dishonest about that as well. They're very dishonest. They can't do the job. Their paperwork is awful. So they're not a professional company. No. But when you're dealing with people who are so ignorant, they don't know any better.
And in fact, that reminds me, if you did have proper management company, i.e. against your RTI, right to manage, if you had the original setup, if they have to do anything, they have to change anything, like garden changes, etc. and all, they send letters to everybody. Every leaseholder is aware of what things are going to be happening. But by the sounds of what you are saying, that people don't come to know what's happening, because it's one person's decision, or handful of people's decision, and everybody else finds out after the action has been taken. So that is not even compliant with what normal expected communication is. Even if it is one-way communication, the leaseholder should have a chance to be aware of it, be able to do something about it if they so wish.
yeah, those, well, like I said, when they do anything that they do, they just, they either don't tell us, and they have never, like I said, they would held any meetings, even though that was on the that was on the order, on the command of the directors at the time, like Nicole and George at the time. She didn't want to have meetings, so Prime of course agreed with it, because they all they wanted was
It
the
works
money,
for them.
so
Yeah,
it works for them,
exactly.
right? So they
It's easy
can,
money for them for
yeah,
not doing much. Yeah.
yeah, it's easy. They got
Mm.
free money from the leaseholders, from these people, for the past 7 years. And even now, when I said get rid of Prime, you need to sack Prime because you can't keep them anymore. Mamas doesn't even, he can't do it because he doesn't know what to do. Simple as that. He
Oh
doesn't
God.
know what to do. He doesn't know how to
Oh
sack the
God.
company. He just
Oh
wants to
God.
keep
Yeah.
them on.
Yeah.
And it's, I think it's astonishing is that there's no,
Yeah. It basically comes back to what's their motivation to be a director. It's about that, title and ego of
yeah.
ego satisfying um, action rather than actually doing something or understanding what the job requires.
Mm, mm. And as long as he has these two dogs that agree with him, the Napoleon, he'll carry on doing what he does, doesn't it?
Mm.